Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. My name is Ali and let's talk about finance. If you're looking to buy your first home, this video is for you. I'm going to be going over all of the details of the first home savings account as well as how you can use it to help save for that down payment for the purchase of your first home. So let's get started. So first, let's talk about what is the first home savings account. The first home savings account is an investment account. It's an investment account in a very similar way to the registered retirement savings plan and the tax-free savings account. Now, the first home savings account actually takes the best of both the registered retirement savings plan and the tax-free savings account and puts it all into one. When you go to contribute into the first home savings account, you get to deduct any contributions that you make off of your income in a similar way to when you contribute into the registered retirement savings plan. So essentially what this means is, say for example, you made $75,000, you contributed $5,000 into the first home savings account. When you go to file your taxes, you get to claim $5,000 off of your income. So that means instead of claiming $75,000 as income for that year, you get to claim $70,000. So ultimately you get to save on the taxes on that $5,000 of contributions that you made. With the first home savings account, the one thing that's different though is you get to withdraw that money tax-free if you're using it towards the purchase of your first home. So this is essentially the same thing as with the tax-free savings account. With the tax-free savings account, any growth and any withdrawals out of the tax-free savings account is tax-free. You don't have to pay taxes on it. So very similarly, the first home savings account works in the same way. As long as you're using that money towards the purchase of your first home, then you're able to take that money out tax-free. You don't have to pay any taxes on it. Now let's talk about who's eligible to actually open up a first home savings account. So as the name suggests, it's someone who is looking to purchase their first home. So somebody who has never owned a home. The definition of who a first-time home buyer is actually a little bit different than just who's never owned a home. The government deems that anybody who has not owned a home in the current year as well as the previous 4 years is eligible as a first-time home buyer. So this essentially means that if you haven't owned a home in the last 5 years, say for example, you owned a home many years ago, but in the last 5 years you haven't owned a home or you haven't jointly owned a home with anybody, you are still considered a first-time home buyer in the eyes of the government. Now, of course, when the government comes out with this type of an account where there's tax benefits, they are going to limit how much you're able to contribute into the actual account. So in this case, there's a contribution limit of $8,000 per year up to a maximum of $40,000. So let's say, for example, you opened up the account this year in 2024. So in 2024, right away, as soon as you open up the account, you have a contribution space of $8,000. Now, what happens is when the calendar year turns into 2025, you get an additional $8,000 of contribution space in that year as well. And so on and so forth until you are no longer eligible to contribute anymore because you reached the maximum of $40,000 contributed into the account. Now here's a couple of things to keep in mind though. Say for example, you did not use all of the contribution space in a given year. Now what happens to that contribution space? So essentially what happens is that contribution space that you haven't used can get carried forward to the next year. However, there is a little bit of a caveat here. The maximum amount of contribution space that can roll over into the next year is $8,000. So say for example, in year one, you only contributed $4,000. $4,000 will roll over to year number 2, and now you have $12,000. So $4,000 that rolled over plus $8,000 of new contribution space. So now you have $12,000 that you can contribute into the first home savings account in that given year. Now let's say in that year you contributed another $3,000. So now you have $9,000 of contribution space left at the end of year 2. Now when you go to roll that over into year number 3, you could only roll over $8,000 out of the $9,000 into year number 3. So then ultimately what happens in year number 3, the maximum contribution that you could make in that year is going to be $16,000. So $8,000 that rolled over plus that $8,000 of new contribution space that you get in that year. So this is where people get a little bit confused because they automatically think that any contribution space that they have used continues to roll over. However, that is not actually the case. So you just have to be really careful when it comes to this, because at the end of the day, you don't want to over contribute in a given year, because if you over contribute into the first home savings account, there's actually a penalty of 1% per month for any money that is considered an over contribution in the account. Now let's put it all into perspective. Let's say you have the $40,000 that you contributed into the first home savings account. Realistically, if that money is being invested, you're gonna have more than $40,000 available when you go to withdraw that money. And just like the tax-free savings account, the growth on those investments are going to be tax-free. You don't have to worry about paying any taxes on any growth of the investments that's sitting within the account. Now let's say you're ready to buy your first home. What is it that you have to do? One, you have to make sure that you're buying a qualified home for the first home savings account. Now, what is considered a qualified home? In most cases, almost every single property is considered a qualified home. If you want to double check with your financial institution or even your realtor, they should be able to let you know whether the home that you're looking to purchase is considered a qualified home to use the first home savings account for. When you're ready to actually use that money, there's a couple of things that you have to keep in mind. One is you have to be a resident of Canada when you go to withdraw that money. Now, the reason for this is because if you're a resident of Canada, you actually get to take advantage of the tax opportunities and the tax savings with the first home savings account, whereas a non-resident, they get treated differently from a tax perspective. So you have to be a resident of Canada when you go to withdraw those funds out of the first home savings account if you don't want to pay any tax. Now, let's say you had a plan of buying a home and you ended up changing your mind. Something changed, you don't want to buy a home anymore. What is it that you can do with the first home savings account? So there's a couple of things. One is you can always roll that over into your registered retirement savings plan. There's a special government form that you have to complete, which allows you to transfer the money that you have in the first home savings account into a registered retirement savings plan. Essentially, when this has to be done is either by the end of 15 years of when the first home savings account was actually opened. So say, for example, you opened up the first home savings account in 2024. You have until 2039 to either withdraw that money to buy that first home or transfer it into the registered retirement savings plan. Now, the other thing as well is similar to the registered retirement savings plan, there is an age limit for how long you can actually have those funds. So that would be the year you turn 71 years old. So once you turn 71 years old, you have to transfer that into a registered retirement savings plan where you're gonna start drawing income from that if you haven't already used it to buy your first home based on the eligibility of the first home savings account. So just to summarize everything that I've mentioned, one is you get tax deductions from any contributions that are made in the first home savings account, and you get to withdraw that money tax-free as long as you're a resident and you're buying your first eligible home for the first home savings account. Two, if you over contribute, there is a penalty of 1% per month for any amount that you over contribute. So you really want to make sure that you're not over contributing. The amount of contribution space that you have is $8,000 per year. And if you haven't used all of that contribution space, then that gets to roll over into the next year up to a maximum of a rollover of $8,000. Now, the maximum that you can contribute is $40,000, which you can actually invest in a very similar way to the tax-free savings account and the registered retirement savings plan. If you don't use the first home savings account to buy your first home, you can roll that over into the registered retirement savings plan and continue to invest that money and use it towards retirement purposes. So there you have it, guys. That's everything you need to know about the first home savings account and how you can use that to save for a down payment for your first home. If you guys like this video, please leave a like down below. Also, if you have any questions, leave those in the comments down below. If you learned anything from this video, please share it with your friends and family. At the end of the day, if you learned something from this, I'm sure they will too. Also, if there's any particular topics that you want me to create a video about in the future, please leave those in the comments down below and I'll be more than happy to make those videos in the future. As always, guys, stay safe, take care, and we'll see you guys in the next one.